opinion and question posed by netizens. And one final theory from our research, the most popular theory, is the theory that Mike did die by self-exit, but that doesn't make JP Miller less guilty of killing her. One netizen summed up this theory in a comment on Reddit. When you have been groomed since 14 or 15 years old, when you have reached out to the police for help and no one is helping, your church is not helping you, when your spouse brainwashed you while grooming you as a child, and then makes you feel like you're crazy, and he puts you in an institution, he steals your car and puts a tracker on your car, you get to a point where there feels like there's no way out. It is not a woman's fault if she ends it all, when it was someone else that pulled the metaphorical trigger. Netizens also cite that the chances of the whole thing being a conspiracy with hitmen and a premeditated plot are highly unlikely compared to the chances that she did die by self-exit, but that JP should still be held accountable in some way. In most cases like this, I assume JP would release a statement through his attorney like he did and retreat to try not to stir stuff up and lay low, but no, he starts posting onto TikTok. These full-length videos are going to be linked in the show notes, but they have been condensed for length here. In one video, JP starts off by saying, "Greetings, everybody. I'm here to let you know that my silence is nothing more than wisdom and self-control, so we can win the war that is up ahead. I look forward to presenting over 350 pieces of proof on what Micah thinks about her family and what Micah thinks about her lawyer and the things her lawyer's saying and the things that her family's saying, and Charlotte and all these other people that are saying things."
People forget that Micah corresponded with me more than anybody else on planet Earth. And I know her heart, and I have her text messages, and we're going to disprove all the lies that are out there. And there's so many lies, it seems like everybody thinks the world is flat. And you ask them why, and they say, well, it says on the news the world's flat. Or, you know, Robbie Stinky Harvey said that it's flat. Or JLR Never Investigates says that it's flat. But when I get to court, I'm going to show you that the world is round. And you're going to be shocked at some of the things that you see that Micah says. And we're going to find out actually who is responsible for my wife's death. And Micah will have justice when it's all said and done, and I'm going to make sure of it. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you soon. God bless.
In another TikTok, he addresses the fact that he preached the day after his wife passed and the announcement he made of his wife's passing. And he basically says, in the beginning of the TikTok, that Micah allegedly wanted a very thick wedding band tattooed on her wedding finger. He says, so that when she was working out or when we were on vacation, when she didn't have a ring, she let everybody know that she was still married. That is not something that someone who is being abused does. Which I don't think, again, is factually correct, but that could be my cluttered brain. So the reason I preached the night after she passed, the night before that at midnight, I had 5 people in my house telling me not to preach. I would be crazy for doing it. I didn't listen. It's because at first I didn't believe it. I had spent the past 3.5 months doing everything I could to keep her alive. My goal every single day to find somebody to some way get her medicine, because I told them that she was going to commit suicide if she didn't get her lithium. And I went to her pastors, counselors, doctors, policemen, judges, friends, family, roommates, everybody you could possibly think of, and nobody believed me. So to get that call that night that it happened, I'm sure you can imagine what a failure I felt, as well as this just can't be true. It became my worst nightmare. There's no way. And so I thought maybe the family was playing a trick on me or something. The other side of it was, I thought if it is true, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to do anything. I want to just keep living my life as if it never happened, because I was not ready to believe that it happened. So the next day I preached. I was like a fool. And then I made my announcement for everybody to be quiet and leave, because like a moment of silence, like you do in respect. I didn't I didn't want anyone to be talking about their mental illness or asking me questions. Or
I'd rather hear a genuine happy birthday from the AI than a whole bunch of slut-fearing whores. God, not us here. Not Liz's wishing me happy birthday.
I just want them to leave and go talk to Jesus about it, and then talk to me at some...
Thank you, Google. You rock. You too. You still sometimes suck, but I love you.
Later date. I was not prepared to deal with any of it at all. I'm sure you cannot imagine what it's like to be trying your best to keep somebody alive and then find out they passed.
Haters need to go suck on their own cocks. Or find a cock to suck on. Because anytime you got that much time to talk about somebody else's life, please.
And then how you handle yourself in the next 24, 48 hours. I don't think there's a manual on that. So if that offends anybody, I apologize, but I did the best that I could with what I had. And God bless. Other allegations in his series of TikToks include, he states that someone is making fun of him because he sniffs, but he says it's a tic that he's had since he was a kid, which I don't know. I'm just saying he says a lot of things, okay? He yaps a lot.
He really is a talker.
Yeah, and just like everything becomes such a, woe is me, look at me, I'm so good, everybody's evil. He said the whole case is actually about mental health awareness. He alleges and claims that Micah was diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, schizophrenia, dependent personality disorder. He claims that she had several other diagnoses by different doctors at different times all throughout the last 7 years. He continues the 2 diagnoses that stayed every single year were schizophrenia and bipolar 2. He states bipolar 2 is when you're super high and you want to give away $1,000. The low is when you want to die. He said that she had ups and downs and it was a constant struggle, but they were getting through it. He further alleges, and he makes some wild claims about her mental health, which again, I can't say for certain if it's not true, but I imagine imagine if her symptoms were this bad, that a lot of people would speak up and say so, or that she would have done other things that people would have stories about to share. Others must have noticed. He claims and alleges that Micah would play chess with people that were not there without a chessboard. Like imaginary people, imaginary chessboard. She would hear voices or talk to people who were not there. She would forget who she was, forget that she was his wife, forget who he was, forget that he was her husband. Sometimes she would forget her family. He claims that she was, quote, deep into the schizophrenia and was delusional and accusing him of certain things like slashing her tires or sending a naked picture or stalking her or things like that that he claims he didn't do. Which, what about the email that he allegedly sent her apologizing? Anyway, he claims he found an Apple AirTag in his car in the truck that week, and he saw her popping up everywhere he went around the week. Remember that gas station video where she's like, walk away?
Walk away.
I'll show you the pictures.
Do you want to go to jail?
They'll be on Facebook in a few hours.
Alrighty, you'll be in jail in a few hours. Walk away.
He's like recording her, and he tells her, and he's like, no, she followed me to the gas station. Like a little spy. He says mental illness is sad. It's sad. But we managed to always find lightheartedness in life in spite of it, and we always got through it. I would do things like sometimes I would play into the delusion, pretend like I was a double agent who quit their job to marry this beautiful girl, and I'd have to show her our marriage license. He alleged that her life was just so easy and perfect. He said, we worked very hard to keep her enjoying her life. She didn't have to cook a single meal. She didn't have to clean. She didn't have to work. She just had to take her medicine and enjoy life. He also alleges that he texted Micah's family offering to pay for all their travel expenses to come see Micah's body. He claims they asked for $2,500, but he gave them $3,500. He said within 7 minutes after the family cashed the check, they went onto Facebook to post about needing money for travel expenses. He claims he texted the entire family, quote, I'd love for you to come and see Micah's body. Here's the times that the funeral home says are best. They thumbs up the message, and about an hour after that, they posted on Facebook that I would not let them see Micah's body. Please help me understand that, is what he says. Now again, he did not release these messages. So he didn't show the messages. He didn't release the messages. Alleging.
On TikTok.
On TikTok.
He's still talking on TikTok?
Oh, he's yapping. Oh, he stopped yapping. I think his attorney told him to stop yapping. But he was yapping.
I wonder if these will be brought up later.
Yeah. He continues, they said, I forced them to sign some cremation paper that I knew nothing about and had no idea what they were talking about. Days later, I was given this piece of paper that the mom and dad both signed saying they wanted Micah to be cremated, and they chose to have that, which I totally agree with because of the way that she passed away. I thought that was what was best, but nobody forced them to sign anything or anything. I don't even know about what they're talking about with that. They said that I pushed for the cremation to happen quickly to hide things. The national average is 3 days, because after that, the body starts to smell, which I imagine he had to look that up, which is, again, very odd.
I have to pause it because this is a little message for haters. It looks like you need a little relaxing. Take a little relaxing. See? Chill. Chill. Chill.
But he continues, she was cremated 6
That's a lie. My hair needs a perm. Hateful bitch.
days after she passed away so that her ashes will be ready for the funeral the next day. While the family was there, I told the funeral director, I said, let them know that I'll pay for all the urns that they want to keep the ashes in. I'll pay for the jewelry. This stainless steel cross, because he's wearing a stainless steel cross, has Micah's ashes inside. It's the only ashes I have. They have all the rest of her ashes. The funeral director called me and said the bill is going to be $18,000. I said, why? He said, they all picked out 24-karat gold jewelry. So I said, please call them back and let them know that if I'm paying, they got to get the cheap stuff. And it was still well over $10,000. But I didn't mind because the way you treat people was not based on the way that they treat you.
Gosh.
It's based on your own heart.
Unless they haters, then you gotta treat them like the red bear.
Exhausting.
Sorry, those are calling out to lot lizards and birds alike. Sorry.
To listen to him.
Yes. And so if you could help me understand the answers to those questions, I'd appreciate it. Thanks a lot. God bless. He continues, here we go, okay, all this is part B, I guess. The Francis family, Micah's family, said that there were bruises on Micah's body. There were none. I saw her body 4 times. I saw it once in the hospital, 3 times in the funeral home. The hospital that prepared her body for me to see it, the nurse and the medical examiner said there were no bruises. And Robinson County said there were no bruises, and the funeral home who washed her entire body and put her in pajamas for us to see her body said there were no bruises. So 4 independent parties say no bruises, but then you have the one who waited until days after she's cremated and there's no proof. They didn't take any pictures. They didn't tell anyone what they supposedly saw. They wait till later and say, hey, there were bruises on her body. Bruises on her body.
Oh, they did take pictures.
Yes, from what I can tell, they did take pictures, but he's saying they didn't, yeah. He said, why in the world would we believe that? I literally don't understand the logic behind it. I don't understand it because let's say the Francis family came forward and said,
No, man, she's a crazy bitch, man, bipolar. I crackhead.
there were no bruises on her body. Robinson County said there were no bruises on her body. The medical examiner said there's no bruises on her body. The funeral said there's no bruises on her body. And then I step up and I said, guys, that's a lot. Hey everybody, I saw bruises. I know I didn't tell you when it happened. I know I didn't take a picture. I know I waited until after she was cremated, but I saw bruises on her body. Would you believe me? Then in another video, which is probably more widely talked about. First off, JP starts the video early on by stating that Micah's mom was married multiple times. Okay, nobody cares.
What?
The way he brings it up is very strange and disrespectful, and I imagine because of his religious background, he thinks that people will draw connection. I think he thinks people will draw connections to Micah's personality and her character based on the amount of marriages her family had.
That is crazy.
Yeah. He goes on to say, Micah, my wife, had 7. I think her mom's married 7 times. Michael Francis is the biological father. Like, he literally didn't need to say any of that because Michael Francis has been pretty vocal about this case. So, like, everybody knows. And then if you just say Micah's father, what do you mean? It's very obvious to me what I think he's doing. He said the other day on some show something to the effect of Micah's, one of her tattoos, my name, that's my signature that is tattooed on her body. He inferred that meant that I owned her and that I was controlling her and manipulative, and then I made her get that tattoo so that I could brand her and stamp her and say that she belongs to me. That's not really how it worked. She got my signature tattooed on the other side of her body, but I don't think that it means that I was controlling and manipulative. I didn't think that it means that I owned her. I don't think it was a brand.
I used to work in hospitality, and it paid the bills, but deep
Or anything I forced her to do. It was completely her idea. I don't know why Michael would think that. But if you do think that's what it means, if somebody has someone else's name, their signature, even tattooed on their body, if you think it means that person owns them and that they're over them and they're controlling them, then what would you say, Michael, about this? And whose idea do you think this was?
Her husband, of course. Let's see what this is.
2018. Police in Clinton, Missouri raced to the scene of an armed robbery at a local restaurant. A man has threatened him.
No, thank you. Let's see, spiritual warfare. Is every civilization doomed to fail? Let's see what this is.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of After School. My name is Greg Eldrittic, and I'm a history professor who studies ancient Greece and Rome. Today, we'll be exploring the theories of the ancient Greek historian Polybius, who wrote about why civilizations rise and fall, as well as what explains the astonishing success of the Roman Republic. So, let's get started. Is every civilization doomed to rise but then inevitably fall? Is there some ideal form of government that will allow a civilization to avoid collapse? How can we explain why some civilizations flourish and expand while others stagnate or are easily conquered? These are vital questions that humans have pondered.
Sorry. Let's see what else is going on
Or are easily conquered. These are vital questions that humans have pondered.
Opinion and question posed by netizens. And one final theory from our research, the most popular theory is the theory that Maya did die by self-exit, but that doesn't make JP Miller less guilty of killing her. One netizen summed up this theory in a comment on Reddit. When you have been groomed since 14 or 15 years old, when you have reached out to the police for help, your church is not helping you, your spouse brainwashed you while grooming you as a child, and then you feel in your...
Well, I guess you can't watch. I'll see. Anyway, I was just testing. I just want to see. Now, come on, give me some horror. Let's see, what do we got here? You want to watch some Mudaha about the worst New York rapper of all time? Yeah, sounds too good. Mass deportation. What do you guys want to watch? Let's do this.
I've been sitting on this script for a while, and after watching They Clone Tyrone back in July 2023, it became more important to me to dust off this script draft and look again into the world of pimp culture. But I kept getting sidetracked. The script re-entered my radar when news dropped about Sean Diddy Combs and ongoing rape and sex trafficking allegations. Now, it's finally time. While pimping is as old as sex work itself, the purpose of this episode of Let's Talk About Sex History will be to examine the unique relationship between pimping and Black Americans and the economically
It's usually done by your own.
disenfranchised Black community. Pimping, which calls for violence, rape, manipulation, degradation, etc., came to be seen as a respectable way to fight the system.
Tell them to put their mothers on the corner, and then you do it.
And make something of oneself. The very meaning of pimping would come to be associated explicitly with Black men, thanks to urban literature, Blaxploitation films, and hip-hop. How is pimping culture...
And all Black men don't have the biggest penises either. That's a goddamn lie.
affected Black sexual politics, society, and how we perceive sex trafficking. And like in every episode of this series, what do we have to gain from being honest about Black sexual history? Throughout the course of Let's Talk About Sex History, we've discussed
that Black men get off on the Black exploitation of Black women. Black women have it the worst out of all the peoples in this economy.
the good, bad, and ugly of human sexuality, because the pursuit of pleasure should be a safe, happy, and consensual experience. And we make better choices when we're informed.
But in the ghetto, we try to make $1 out of 15 cents, and that means you, ho. Get on that motherfucking corner.
Video is no different. Frequent viewers of my content know that this video's sponsor, Vegucated, has over 100 courses.
After you put your ass on the corner, then you can put your cousin in the corner, your other cousin, and your mama, and your titties, and then you get all the money you need. Open up that business. Go ahead, open up that deli and smoke shop. Or that salon you always wanted to open. Sell some pussy. Put that ass out there.
Thank you. Did you know that there's a specific 2,000-year-old Korean food that you can eat to help get rid of your...
After your mama, sir.
If sex work is the world's oldest profession, pimping is the second oldest. In ancient Greece, the owners of pornai, or sex workers who usually had sex with many men in brothels or in the street, were called pornoboskos. The modern word pimp first appeared in a 1607 English play by Thomas Milton called Your 5 Gallons. But it took a few centuries before it came to be the common word for procurer. In pre-modern Europe, many procurers prior to reforms were female madams in brothels, like Elizabeth Cresswell, one of the most renowned of the 17th century. She was a shrewd self-promoter, and her clients included the elite of London, all the way up to King Charles II himself. In numerous societies where sex workers have plied their trade, the fear of violence, law enforcement, or other factors, pimps offered protection in exchange for all, most, or a
That's the damn lie. Them pimps be the first one to set you up.
portion of the workers' money. Many pimps, like the pornoboskos, engaged in sex trafficking. The Catholic Church reported Nikki Roberts in Whores in History, dabbled in pimping and trafficking in the medieval era. In the case of fancy girls and fancy women, or enslaved women who were bought expressly for the purpose of sex, particularly in Louisiana, the procurers and pimps were enslavers, embodying the repulsive sex trafficking of antiquity and today, where there is no consent or autonomy. Aside from street walking and following encampments during the Civil War, the female procurer was the most prominent kind of sex working relationship in America before the 1920s, when progressive era legislation, moral panics, and the white slavery panic sent consensual sex work further underground. And as detailed by Nikki Roberts, the prohibition of alcohol and the resulting criminal organizations meant sex workers were extorted out of money by mobsters and pimps. As the criminalization of sex work became more formalized, the poor material conditions of survival sex workers fostered a dependence on pimps, particularly male ones. With the stigmatization of a prostitution arrest and the trauma and harm that comes from jail,
and all you needed was a group of homo thug dudes to go fuck up that madam, and she no longer the pimp.
employment elsewhere becomes more and more unlikely with each arrest. A return to survival sex work
becomes a dominated male industry, male-dominated industry, man ruling woman. That's the oldest game of all. Not game. Work. Prostitution was the first word? No.
and or pimping becomes more and more likely. All the while, from the 1920s onward, the black male pimp held a special folk glory. This was the reality that spawned a
that and the drug dealer.
distinct culture of pimping from the mid-20th century onward.
Black and ugly as ever. However, the dealer stayed Gucci down to the socks.
The very first black pimp of note was a real man and folk hero named Stagger Lee, or Lee Shelton, a late 19th century resident of St. Louis. He was known to associate with a group of pimps called the Macs. Mac, or mackerel, had been a term for pimp as early as the late 19th century, abbreviated from the French word macquereau, meaning procurer. On Christmas 1895, Lee got into an argument with a man named William Lyons at a bar, who snatched the hat from Lee's head. According to the St. Louis indignantly demanded its return. Lyons refused, and Sheldon withdrew his revolver and shot Lyons in the abdomen. When his victim fell to the floor, Sheldon took his hat from the hand of the wounded man and coolly walked away. He was subsequently arrested and locked up at the Chestnut Street station. Lee went to jail, was eventually released, likely thanks to political influence he swayed, and would die in 1912. Over 60 recordings detailed and mythicized Stagger Lee and his cold and calm demeanor, as well as plays and stories. But a more infamous pimp was on the way. In 1918, Robert Lee Maupin was born in Chicago, Illinois. It's important to note that by this time, various ethnic groups had dabbled in sex commerce, including Italians and Poles, but also the Chinese, who trafficked women in California and the Pacific Northwest and managed to turn the trade into profitable and legal dry cleaners, restaurants, and more. The black Chicago sex...
You heard it there first, and then they turned around and tried to make a legitimate business.
trade up until this point was documented in Cynthia M. Blair's
that
I've Got to
again.
Make My Living. And a crucial part of the industry was the red light district known as the Levee, which operated from 1880 to 1912 and was similar to
Sorry, I gotta hear that again.
and Poles, but also the Chinese, who trafficked women in California and the Pacific Northwest and managed to turn the trade into profitable and legal dry cleaners, restaurants, and more. The black Chicago sex trade up until this point was documented in Cynthia M. Blair's I've Got to Make My Living. And a crucial part of the industry was the red light district known as the Levee, which operated from 1880 to 1912 and was similar to New Orleans' Storyville. Blair wrote, "Men's control of women's work pace, earnings, and bodies did not emerge as an endemic feature of urban prostitution until after 1920. As nightclubs and saloons grew in Chicago's Black Belt after 1900, more pimps popped up." Dr. Blair also noted that when black men were brought into court in the 1910s for pimping or pandering, it usually had something to do with white women. For instance, famous boxer and Chicago resident Jack Johnson was arrested twice for so-called pimping and trafficking under the Mann Act for traveling with his white girlfriend, an ex-sex worker named Lucille Cameron. So if a black man was seen with a white woman in the early 20th century, it was usually assumed that he was pimping her. This was the Chicago that Robert
Even a prostitute, you can be caught even there with the prostitute as long as she was not white. Why?
Maupin was born into, and where he would spend parts of his childhood. At the age of 3, he was sexually abused for the first time by a babysitter. And after enjoying the guidance of a stepfather, he resented his mother when she left him and thus severed the relationship. Robert hated
He looked like a black Charlie Chaplin. Get the fuck out of here. What's this, a younger version of, what's his name, Richie Rich? Not Richie Rich, what's his name? Darn it, you know what I'm talking about.
where he would spend parts of his childhood. At the age of 3, he was sexually abused for the first time by a babysitter. And after enjoying the guidance of a stepfather, he resented his mother when she left him and thus severed the relationship. Robert hated his mother and fantasized about beating her. As a teen, Robert would see pimps bring their women into his mother's hair shop, and he was enchanted by the control they exerted and their lifestyles. Later, in his best-selling memoir, Robert Iceberg Slim Beck would write how an older pimp named Sweet Jones told him when he was 18 and entering the Milwaukee game, Slim, a pimp is really a whore who has reversed the game on whores. Pimp, the story of my life, written with the help of his white wife Betty Shue in the wake of the civil rights and black power movements, detailed Beck's rise in Milwaukee, Chicago, Detroit, and his fall. Over 2 million copies were sold between 1967 and 1973 in liquor stores, barbershops, and on street tables. The book also got passed around in prisons, which is where a young Donald Goines, struggling with heroin addiction in Michigan's Jackson Penitentiary, first read it. Though he grew up with middle-class black parents, Goines ran the streets after being discharged from the military in the 50s, and one of his many illicit occupations was pimping. After reading Beck's memoir, Goines was inspired and began writing fiction, 16 novels laced with pimps, pushers, cops, and criminals, before his murder in 1974. Whoreson, the story of a ghetto pimp, was the gritty tale of a boy born to a sex worker who inevitably becomes a pimp. Robert Beck's autobiography had ripple effects on a number of hip-hop figures and pimps, specifically with its influence in the blaxploitation craze just a few years later. Take Robert Poole, a Bay Area Mac who began writing a screenplay about his life while in
Why not join everybody else and shit on the black woman? Yeah.
After reading Pimp. His screenplay was allegedly written on toilet paper and would be The Mac, starring Max Julian and Richard Pryor. The film explores the life of a pimp named Goldie, whose brother is a black nationalist. But we'll be back to blaxploitation in a bit. Another early pimp of note was Malcolm X in 1920s Harlem. He explained the game in his autobiography thusly. Most men, the prostitutes felt, were too easy to push around. The prostitutes said that most men needed to know what the pimps knew. A woman should occasionally be babied enough to show her the man had affection, but beyond that, she should be treated firmly. These tough women said that it worked with them. All women, by their nature, are fragile and weak. They are attracted to the male in whom they see strength. Nearly all pimp literature is adamant about the special brand of masculinity exhibited by the stereotypical pimp. In stark opposition to the patriarchal standard that men take care of their woman and family, the pimp's masculinity rests on extracting resources from women to fund their lifestyles. The women, hardened by street life and abuse, wouldn't fold to a weak man. The goal was to penetrate a woman's mind and instill your principles and protocols so she performed without question or thought, something that took finesse and not always pure physical abuse. A woman's devotion was and is the pimp's ultimate display of success. While female procurers had been common before, after the 1920s, the few that popped up earned notoriety. Take Odessa Madre. She was a graduate of Washington's Dunbar High School, saying in a 1980 interview, "There was only 3 blacks at Dunbar back then. I mean black like me. I had good diction, I knew the gestures, but they always made fun of me." She skipped college to run the streets, and many of her friends were Irish rich cops and criminals she had grown up with in the mixed neighborhood of Cowtown. She was noted for being lesbian, and her designation of pimp instead of madam stemmed from her masculinity. She'd arrived at her nightclub, Club Madre, surrounded by her stable, and she allegedly had a relationship with the performer, Moms Mabley. Madre explained, "I didn't set out to get into the trick trade, but I had come to know so many white fellows." Role. This power and respect, granted by financial success and effective pimping, would continue to be coveted as the role evolved and was dramatized on film. Slim would move on to write a series of other books, including essays and novels, as well as hitting the college lecture circuit as a public intellectual and attending Black Panther meetings. His 1967 novel, Trick Baby, was turned into a 1972 blaxploitation film, but it was severely diluted. His thoughtful tale about a drag queen in Chicago in 1969's Mama Black Widow, and his 1971 book of political essays and revolutionary rhetoric, The Naked Soul of Iceberg, were both overlooked. Additionally, Iceberg Slim's original message disparaging his former occupation as pimp was lost in the heady blaxploitation of the era. Think Superfly, The Mac, Dolomite, and Willie Dynamite. In Willie Dynamite, the pimp compares himself to any other titan of American industry, saying, 7 girls out there. Every 10 minutes, one comes off the production line, like that. This is a business, baby, a production line. And just like GM, Ford, Chrysler, Willie's coming through. But like so many other films where easy money was explored, the fall was swift. By the way, can we just get some love for the beautiful Joyce Walker who starred in Willie Dynamite? Like, this video had me enchanted. She's gorgeous. Look at her. Beautiful. In 1974's Truck Turner, Isaac Hayes hunts down a pimp named Gator, who relies on the help of a madam played by Nichelle Nichols in her only blaxploitation role.
So if you're over 40 and haven't achieved freedom of movement and flexibility, you're nuts. If you're not doing bodyweight strength, you're nuts. I fix back, shoulder, knee, weight, strength, and flexibility issues from years of sitting as a student, teacher, and artist, and I'm doing one-arm handstands.
Tommy, you ain't gonna keep this shit together with Gator gone?
Come here, you little black bitch. Your ass belongs to me. I tell you what you can and can't do with it. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I didn't say I was leaving.
Shut up! Now you whores sit down, I want to talk to you. Anybody thinking about leaving here is going to find my left foot square up their ass. Do you understand it?
What?
Shut up, you junkie whore!
When the movie was shown in theaters, it was a double feature with Foxy Brown, depicting Pam Grier in the titular role going undercover as a sex worker and busting a sex trafficking ring. Both films were written by white people. Did you know that the pimp, Sport, in the 1976 film Taxi Driver was originally black? Quentin Tarantino insisted that Columbia Pictures should have never switched the race of the pimp in Taxi Driver from black to white as it was originally written, because he thought it would be more impactful that way. In a November 1977 issue of Ebony, a psychologist explained the many ways men pimp their women. It discussed different of emotional abuse, forced submission in relationships, as well as different types of misogynists. So pimping terminology was entering the mainstream, and the clothes worn in blaxploitation films were very fashionable for regular people. The aesthetics in films were one thing, but the subculture was explored deeply in 1973's Black Players, The Secret World of Black Pimps, a study by social anthropologists Richard and Christina Milner, featuring over 148 hours of taped interviews. The study grew from the fact that while in graduate school, Christina, a white woman, started stripping to support her and her husband Richard. Coincidentally, an origin story that earned Richard respect from the pimps they interviewed because they thought he was pimping his old lady. Christina's stage name was Tiger Red. They mentioned that obviously not all pimps in the world are black. The majority are undoubtedly white, but we have attempted to describe only the particular scene we fell into. For 6 months, the couple immersed themselves into the Bay Area, earning the trust of sex workers and pimps. They gathered their research at bars, restaurants where pimps and hoes gather after work, jam houses, private fried chicken parties in homes attended by 20 to 30 people, and public parties advertised, sometimes over the radio on a soul station, as Players Night and held at large nightclubs, among other venues in Oakland and San Francisco. If I quoted all of the interesting things in this book, we'd be here all day. But it's an eye-opening, though dated read on Bay Area pimp culture in the early 70s. The methods of pimps breaking in new women was discussed, as well as the pimp creed of not doing anything unless being paid, which was often repeated. Though interestingly, the pimps interviewed were never paid. The book also ended stereotypes about pimps and made it easier to see how they really operated. A key conclusion by the anthropologist was that the elaborate subculture was because black pimps feel they have to regain their manhood, which has been lost to whitey and to women. The Macs in the interviews were adamant about not being pimped themselves. Explain the Milners. All of us at some time either are exploited or we exploit. This is something the players know, and their honesty is admirable. A pimp's desire is to never be a trick. Of course, that's impossible because everybody has a trick side. That in itself is a topic of pimp humor. Think back to the advice Robert Beck got from a mentor. Out pimping somebody or life before it pimps you. Wrote the Milners. Every American major institution, from the law courts and the business establishment to the armed services, is viewed by the players as a pimping situation. They see society itself as a network of people gaming off each other for money, power, or some kind of ego gratification. The preacher is a pimp gaming off his congregation. The politician is a pimp gaming off his constituents. The wife is a hoe gaming off her husband, who is her trick. The whites pimp the blacks, and the federal government pimps everybody. The view, widely held throughout the ghetto, has recently found expression in the writings of black militants, and is one of the few areas in which pimps and panthers seem to be in perfect agreement. Remember the era that this was in. This was during the Vietnam War, civil rights and black power movements, so of course the idea of the government pimping out the little man, especially black people, was potent.
I mean, it's like this here. Let me see, so you ever really want to have to cut a bitch? Sometimes you want a bitch to think you might, but shit. So Nixon pimp. Well, shit. Yeah. That makes good sense to me. Of course, I was in the shit for a year. You know that, right? A medical division. They had me up in the Central Highlands. Yeah. Nixon know what he doing in Vietnam, bro. You know the game.
Interestingly, Richard, who was allegedly kicked out of his doctoral program because of the study, said in 1973, in the university, it is increasingly clear to me that professors are pimping the students. Through this lens, it makes perfect sense why the pimp would take on legend-like qualities in a similar vein as drug dealers, despite the human toll. The flamboyant subculture of pimping that existed in the black community and that was being depicted in pop culture obscured the fact that pimping was happening in more locations than the hood, and not just by black men. The TV show host and actor James Lipton revealed that he was a pimp in Paris in the 1950s. At the Story Chicken Ranch in La Grange, Texas, the exploits of female madams since 1917 was romanticized and gussied up for the musical and movie The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas, the latter of which starred Dolly Parton and Burt Reynolds. On porn sets, the controlling white pimp boyfriend was best exemplified by Linda Borman, whose abusive husband, Chuck Traynor, forced her to perform as Linda Lovelace in Deep Throat, along with pimping her out. As for Hugh Hefner, whose complex Playboy legacy I will explore in a future video about the good, the bad, and the ugly, he was praised as the most iconic pimp for his carefully crafted image of being surrounded by white women and using their bodies to build his fortune. And recent revelations about life in the Playboy mansion have alleged that this came with mental abuse, drugs, and typical tactics employed by pimps. And as for fictional white pimps, there were Tom Cruise and his competitor in 1983's Risky Business, and a slew of Eastern European pimp characters. Still, when you ask somebody to imagine a pimp, a certain image comes to mind. Think of Huggy Bear, the jive-talking pimp on popular action series Starsky and Hutch. When the 70s were over, that image of the Mac was elevated further in hip-hop by artists who were inspired by the pimp writings and blaxploitation films they grew up on. And as the films and fashion raged, Robert Iceberg Slim Beck fell back from his revolutionary rhetoric in favor of stylizing himself as a pimp again, detailed by Robin D.G. Kelly in the essay, The Fires That Forged Iceberg Slim.
This is how to get in shape fast. The best way to burn fat and get shredded is not keto, it's not paleo, it's not vegan, it's not carnivore, and it's definitely not intense exercises like this. This is what 10 pounds of fat looks like.
The rapper and actor Ice-T, born Tracy Lauren Merrow, claimed to dabble in pimping in the 1980s when living in Hawaii. Part of his inspiration stemmed from a pimp he met there, as well as his lifelong obsession with Pimp by Iceberg Slim. He'd tell Esquire, the lingo, the depth of the streets, the way Slim talked, it was totally fascinating. And before you know it, I was a 16-year-old kid talking to girls like a 50-year-old man. Why does my Ice-T kind of sound accurate? Hold on, I'm sorry. But, he elaborated, you are not a professional at something unless you pay your rent doing it. I never made enough money to pay my rent. So he was a bad pimp, but a pimp nonetheless. He would eventually use his exploitation money to buy turntables and begin making music. He'd later say that pimping would prepare him for his career in Hollywood, saying, I can't act, I really can't act. I ain't no rapper, it's all game. I'm just working these niggas. I'm glad he admitted he can't act, because it's true. But shout out to Law & Order SVU though. Todd Anthony Shaw, the son of two college-educated accountants who moved from LA to Oakland, was influenced by the Mac movie when he began his rap career as Too Short in the 1980s. Noted for being one of the first rappers to use the word bitch in his music, his 1987 album Born to Mac sold over 500,000 copies without distribution. Too Short was allegedly never a pimp, but made the culture a central theme of his work. But that's not to say his pimp sensibilities didn't blend into his real life. In addition to lending his expertise as a pimpology expert in a glorifying documentary, in 2012 through XXL magazine, he told a group of middle schoolers how to turn little girls out. XXL came under fire for the videos, which have since been taken down, but recounted Deneen Miller. In one, he encourages middle school boys to push middle school girls up against walls and push their spit-covered fingers into their vaginas. And in a second, he schools boys on how to convince girls to give up their lunch and money to boys. This was the editor, Vanessa Satin, who let that shit slide. Too Short only realized the error of what he was saying after, quote, I talked to some very responsible females, some very important females. The same year as Too Short's Born to Mac album, the film Street Smart premiered. Starring Christopher Reeve and Morgan Freeman, a reporter makes up a pimp named Tyrone, while a real ruthless pimp with a similar story gains notoriety. Divulged The New Yorker, that's what the screenwriter, David Freeman, did when he published The Lifestyle of a Pimp in New York Magazine in May 1969. It created no big stir, there were no dire results, and no big-time benefits either. Like the protagonist of the film, David Freeman made up everything for that article. The persona and point of view of pimps would be used by various rappers from Ice Cube to Dr. Dre to Snoop Dogg. And in 1992, Robert Beck died with little fanfare or much money to his name, wrote Justin Gifford in Street Poison, the biography of Iceberg Slim. America's most famous pimp was seemingly being pimped by the commercial literary marketplace that had made him a star. He'd document how his publishing company, Holloway House, capitalized on black writers by becoming the self-proclaimed world's largest publisher of black experience paperback books. Holloway House published over 400 such tomes, pimping the authors, including Robert Beck, out of most of their royalties. Holloway House also created Players magazine in 1973 to capitalize on the pimp craze, and it championed itself as the Black Playboy by publishing erotica, softcore news, and shallow ghetto life material, but nothing about black history or intellectualism. It served as a vehicle for advertising Holloway House's urban literature titles and made its white founders wealthy. Enter the Hughes brothers, directors of Menace to Society and Dead Presidents, who wanted to turn Pimp by Iceberg Slim into a movie, but missed out on the film rights. Instead, they created 1999's American Pimp on a budget of less than $1 million, filming and interviewing by themselves. In addition to interviews with illegal pimps, the directors profiled Hugh Hefner and Dennis Hoff, owner of the Bunny Ranch in Nevada and future husband of Heidi Fleiss, a former Hollywood madam we discuss more in Lectual Does the 90s. Hoff started the Moonlight Bunny Ranch in '92. The Hughes brothers were reported to have been filming American Pimp back in 1997, and HBO then decided to churn out Pimps Up, Hoes Down a year before the twins debuted their documentary at Sundance to compete. It's a great training aid for new detectives, said a Las Vegas cop on Pimps Up, Hoes Down. But there was controversy over the paid interviews. Dish Entertainment Weekly in '98, a behind-the-scenes tactic is causing controversy among veteran documentarians. HBO paid pimps between $500 and $700 per day for their participation, while $4,000 went to 3 pimps for permission to film The Players Ball, an underground annual award show. This impacted production for the Hughes brothers. Added Entertainment Weekly, the Hughes brothers also paid pimps for their self-financed project and planned to include a disclaimer, but only after HBO opened the floodgates. Everybody was interested in pimps in the late 90s. News articles followed. Ira Glass hosted 3 pimps from the 1970s on This American Life in '99. And rapped Ice-T in that year's Always Wanted to Be a Hoe. Are you my pimp? Oh dear God, don't say that. I'm your manager, your boyfriend, your agent, your Mac. Now I'm gonna do my hair, baby. I'll be right back. And how old are you? 16? Well, that's just right. But you're 18 if anybody asks tonight. There are an abundance of these types of lyrics told in narrative rap form, but also melding with rappers' personas, making it hard to distinguish what was real and what was just a marketing tactic or a storytelling technique. Pimping would have an additional renaissance in the early 2000s in various real sex exposés on HBO that exposed the gritty underbelly of street-based sex work and, by extension, exploitation. Much of what the Milners had uncovered in the seedy underbelly of the 70s Bay Area had remained intact. One of the Macs in American Pimp, named Rosebud, even got a book deal teaching how to pimp and a smattering of generally good press, while he admitted to violence and literal trafficking. A 2000 documentary called Pimp Snooki explored the life of Derek Avery, a Milwaukee, Wisconsin-based pimp who embodied the extensive world of sex trafficking in the Midwest. He had also been featured in American Pimp and Pimps Up, Hoes Down, as well as an episode of The Jerry Springer Show.
Dennis, you don't sit there and look at me and wave at me. Motherfucking hoe, acknowledge me.
Figuring out your next steps after high school? Accounting Plus is your one-stop shop
to that experience of marginalization. Most of the time and throughout most of my career on YouTube, I find myself wanting to be empathetic, some would say overly empathetic to this population, because I see the good and possibilities within them. I see the pain with them, and I see myself within them. And I genuinely don't think much is gained by mocking them or making them punchlines or targets for derision. At least not much is gained in the form of actually addressing their problems or the problems that they present. And for the most part, this has been a palatable through line in the times I've talked about this population. I'm still very proud of the breakdown I did of the edgelord psyche in my first Manosphere video. I'm super happy with my Incels Make the World Go Round video, which I think was basically the spiritual follow-up to that whole series. And I think I even did a good job in my male desirability video, even though I know some did not appreciate my be yourself advice at the end. I'm not a dating relationship advice guy, y'all. I apologize. it is what it is. Overall, I think I've been as much of a gentle guiding hand to a vulnerable population of young men as possible from my specific standpoint. In fact, I've done it to my own detriment, as my channel has become quite the sausage fest over the years, and my affinity to leave myself open to engaging with these populations has also left me open to criticism and at times resulted in some negative experiences. I bring all this up at the beginning of this video to say a certain type of person that has actually watched me relatively regularly and come away with the idea that I'm just a male feminist who hates men or a misandrist or whatever other word you all want to make up and is not interested in helping this population and just wants to point and laugh at the misanthropic edgelords like everyone else does. You can disagree with me on some of my takes, of course, but to paint me as the grifting misandrist is just not a criticism I'm going to take to heart. You can't have watched me with an open mind and come away with that unless you're the type that is so stuck in that headspace that you really shouldn't be watching me in the first place, because I'm just not where you need to be right now. But if you are like that, or hopefully a little bit further along than that, this video is kind of for you. See, while I'm very proud of my track record and efforts on this topic with this population, I've also become somewhat frustrated, maybe even disillusioned by how intractable some of these folks are, and how for some it seems like no matter how nice or gentle or logical or thoughtful the message or messenger is, they just won't hear it. They just don't get it. Maybe they don't want to get it at all. And after a while, you just want to say, fuck them. Fuck these knuckle-dragging, neck-bearded, dry-dick, bad-skin-having, no-holes-getting, keyboard warrior, bitch-ass, punk-ass, bet you not gonna say it to my face-ass, incels, nig sales, right sales, curry sales, and everything in between, motherfuckers. All y'all motherfuckers in my comment section, subtweets, DM, and especially on Reddit, eat a dick, like, share, and subscribe. If it hasn't been made clear before, I'm making it clear now that going forward to a certain portion of that population, I'm not the person out. For those super stuck in that worldview, the path out isn't going to start with me. I've moved past being annoyed, and I'm just going to focus on those who are here to learn and actually grow. And if you have to, go through, I don't know, an Abba and preach phase before you get to me, cool. That may have seemed mean to some of y'all, and it may have been a little excessive. I may have been having a little fun there. A little trolling, as you guys like to say. Just getting some lols. Is lol still a word? I've lost touch. I don't know. But I'm actually not alone in that sentiment. As it turns out, I seem to be maybe even late to the party, because in the last year, multiple iconic figures or creators of edgelord adjacent media have also came to the same realization that they maybe just shouldn't care about what you guys think anymore. And it's been really interesting, in fact, maybe even satisfying to watch some of the worst fan bases in media get that sudden sinking feeling on how they've been wrong about something the whole time. And I want to explore that in this video. I want to look at three specific, very iconic in the moment, red pill, right-wing, edgelord adjacent pieces of media, and how they've given up on being overly empathetic in their discussion of male pain and edgelord ideology and other vaguely right-wing behavior, and just turned into overt declaration of edgelord's bad and we don't care anymore. What does that mean? Why is that important? And maybe what laughs are there to be had at the expense of these people? So let's get started.
At Job Corps, you can work towards a career. Job Corps provides free schooling, free tuition, free housing, free food.
Free training, free food, free place to stay, great experiences.
You can make your goals come true.
It's free education. It's
on this section before watching at least the first 15 minutes of the video, right? You're gonna watch before you comment? Yeah. Not gonna have to reply that to anyone. Yeah. Let's see. According to dictionary.com,
an edgelord is someone on an internet forum who deliberately talks about controversial, offensive, taboo, or nihilistic subjects in order to shock other users in an effort to appear cool or edgy.
Going further, in their paper Digital Games as Vehicles for Extremist Recruitment and Mobilization, scholars Andrew Newhouse and Rachel Cower had this to say.
Expressing a hateful or heinous sentiment, and in the light of pushback or criticism from others, suggesting that the things they were saying are in jest. While true intent among griefers and edgelords is hard to assess, evidence suggests that these behaviors have contributed to widespread normalization of hateful language in gaming spaces as part of the culture of games.
As this paper alludes to, the edgelord is a nebulous catch-all term for a problematic, predominantly white population, but it can also be described as like the alt-right or neo-fascists, Nazis, red pill spaces, incels, like that whole community of problematic white boys all in one spot. But for the sake of like clarity, which like there is no perfect clarity for this group, because some groups can be described by like 2 or 3 of those terms, but not the other 2 or 3. And of course, they all want you to know that they're specific special snowflakes and that you shouldn't call one something that's related to the other. I'm just gonna call them edgelords and other things interchangeably throughout the video. So like, just roll with me. Because all of these groups tend to have a high affinity for this specific edgy Sigma male archetype in their media. This paper goes on to discuss an important reason why this highly unique and online population is important to pay attention to. They go on to say,
extremist groups have the capacity to build large, sophisticated, consistently evolving networks on gaming platforms. They can also exploit the mechanics of the games themselves to build propaganda and strengthen extremist identity, often in plain sight.
All of this coalesced with what is now a large and very much growing body of research on what I think is best described as a pattern of antisocial online behavior that on occasion does spill out into real-world consequences in the form of doxing and harassment campaigns. And in the most rare and extreme examples, school shootings and happens, free shootings at malls or grocery stores, maybe even black churches.
We want to move now to the dramatic moments in the courtroom as Dylan Roof's chilling and disturbing confession to killing 9 people inside a South Carolina church is played for the jury. At times, Roof was laughing during his confession, and ABC's...
However, it's important to understand that the most typical negative outcome for this behavior is just young, predominantly white guys on the internet being little shits and developing more intense antisocial behavior and beliefs. And that behavior and those beliefs often contribute to further isolating them, which further deteriorates their own mental health outcomes and makes them susceptible to other negative health factors.
Joey is 23 years old. He doesn't have a job, he's not in school. On a given day, he may not get up from his chair, where he sits sometimes for 2 days straight, smoking cigarettes and running chat rooms.
Honestly, I feel more real here, sitting in front of the computer. When I go outside, I almost depersonalize a little bit and feel like I'm playing a video game.
Free shootings and school shootings, while awful, are very, very rare. And edgelords are annoying online, but if you cultivate your own social media and online activity effectively, you can avoid spaces that exist when that's the case. For the most part, the edgelord's greatest risk is to themselves. So why is this significant to media? Well, for the most part, the development of edgelord behavior is often a reaction to poor social efficacy in their environment and community. This can be due to a multitude of factors such as poor social skills, mental and behavioral health challenges, poverty, niche interests, neurodivergence, physical unattractiveness, troubled home lives, etc. Or a combination of those features, which lead to antisocial behavior and can make a variety of escapist experiences attractive to them, i.e. media, TV, video games, comics, etc. Is your day-to-day school life a struggle? Is your home life traumatic? Then imagine yourself as a protagonist in your favorite anime or power fantasy video game or John Wick.
They know you're coming. Of course. But it won't matter.
Further, you can mark your online presence with these avatars as a representation of your interests and beliefs so that others will find you, and then suddenly you have a community of edgelords, which is a key element to this behavior that is under discussed, but I did touch on that in Incels Make the World Go Round, so I won't go over that again here. The media that attracts these types of young men is what I'm going to call Sigma coded, i.e. coming from that Sigma male meme that got hot a couple of years ago that actually, if you think about it, isn't really a new thing. The Sigma male meme and concept may seem like a silly online thing, but it kind of perfectly codifies a lot of the aesthetics and internal logics of this type of media. The Sigma male, for those who don't know, is this silly but to many super serious combination of traditionally idealized masculine traits and antisocial traits, constructed, in my opinion, as a coping mechanism for the aforementioned young men with poor social efficacy to create an image of traditional masculinity that they can reasonably aspire to. A lot of people say, well, this was just a meme and a joke, but what you'll find with this population is that they're always trying to hide the more concerning and heinous elements of those communities, and it's just jokes, it's just memes, until you see that it's most definitely not from their behavior.
Sigma males are the wild cards of the social hierarchy. Unlike alphas who might resort to aggression or betas who often back down, Sigmas operate on a different wavelength entirely. These men don't follow a predictable playbook. They're adaptable, resourceful, and often catch others off guard with their approach to problems.
Sigma males are traditionally masculine in their outward appearance, but also internally they are stoic, cold, and disinterested in typical social activities such as intimate relationships or even friendships. They are lone wolves who run apart from the pack, and the wolf has, much to the chagrin of friend of the channel Super Eye Patch Wolf, become their spirit animal and symbolic of what the Sigma male really is. As I alluded to earlier, a lot of commentators on this topic and even some researchers look at this concept as a new phenomenon, but in my opinion, it's really just a new useful term for an image and concept as old as America itself. The individualistic nature of American culture breeds the sentiment needed for this lone wolf stoic image of masculinity to become idealized. So if you look at media going decades well before the Sigma male meme, you see the presence of this sentiment. Many point to Taxi Driver in 1976 as a quintessential Sigma male protagonist, but I think you can see Sigma coded characters earlier in movies like Easy Rider, Network, A Clockwork Orange, and probably tons of westerns up to that point.
You bring a horse for me?
I, Dolores Price, promise that I will promote the objectives of the Irish Republican Army.
Looks like we're shy of one horse.
This group, and that group's response to social ostracism, and if you want to throw in the leftist lens, alienation from self and body. That said, although it seems to be a uniquely white phenomenon, I'd argue that there are also black versions of the sad white guy movie trope, just like there's black versions of the impossible white guy movie trope. Movies like Menace to Society, Baby Boy, Antoine Fisher, Creed, books like The Invisible Man, all of them definitely have main black male characters who are still...
This video is brought to you by Squarespace. Yes, my brothers, my brodies, my woadies. I'm going to do another one of these little talk to cams. You might have noticed, through some of my videos, I officially joined the woke brigade. It's unfortunate, I didn't really want to, but I'm going to talk how we got here. My political arc has been pretty insane. At one point, I was in a Nico Amalama video supporting Trump. That's me. I'll admit it, blurry boy.
Trump Reporters UK, I'm here. Look at my hat. I love Donald Trump.
So today we're going to talk about how I managed to escape the alt-right pipeline.
Up yours, woke moralists.
How big is Libra? It's 200,000 population.
And how many lost?
45.
There will never be peace on this earth so long as we have this book. It's a violent and cursed book.
Attacks on mosques, other minority communities singled out. Wanton violence alongside racist rhetoric.
When I was a young gangster, a YG, I was a little bruh, right? A little bruh, I'm about 13 years old. And we're invited into school. It was mandatory, we weren't invited. And we had to do a speech. So, you know, my mate goes up and he does the history of Chelsea Football Club. Girl goes up and she does about horse riding. I go up with my little thumb drive, plug it in, 9/11. So I basically proceed to radicalise a classroom of young, impressionable 13-year-olds as to why the American government did 9/11.
Who do you believe was behind 9/11?
Criminal elements of the military-industrial complex, the same ones that staged Gulf of Tonkin, the same ones that staged Operation, the mass shootings of Operation Gladio.
Right.
I was in this kind of like early conspiracy theory bubble. But what I want to say is it was interesting, right? Because at that time, being a conspiracy theorist wasn't left and right. It was just anti-establishment. And so whilst I was listening to Alex Jones, I'd also be listening to the Young Turks and listen.
Today I want to cover Ghetto and his extremely fast downfall in a short video. I'd like to compare Ghetto to characters like Anakin Skywalker, who was a kind-hearted hero who fell to darkness very quickly and rapidly for various reasons. Over time, intrusive thoughts and overall darkness in his soul corrupted his mind and his body to make him the villain that we all know. The earliest Ghetto is shown in the story is when he's in his second year at Jujutsu High, wielding his powerful cursed spirit manipulation technique. Obviously nasty work having to eat these orbs that, according to Ghetto, taste like vomit and shit on a rag, and doing this for the people that he thinks are innocent and deserving of protection because he is powerful. Gojo and Ghetto are essentially a dichotomy between the strongest of the sorcery world. They kind of share this role as being the strongest until Gojo becomes awakened later on, but at this point they're kind of together and they at least have someone to share this with. In their younger years, Gojo and Ghetto also had very different opinions when it came to non-sorcerers. Ghetto says Jujutsu exists to protect non-Jujutsu sorcerers, society should protect the weak and keep the strong in check. Gojo is somewhat put off by these comments and does not like that Ghetto is assigning reasoning and responsibility to Jujutsu. Side note, in the anime, they're bawling in the scene and they were not doing this in the manga, so I really like that. So I actually think I can explain his downfall just because look, that shot just rattles out and then Gojo just picks it up and throws it in. Proof Gojo can beat LeBron, I think so. Ghetto had the perfect philosophy and mentality to be the protagonist of the story. So what made him change his mind so rapidly to become such a horrendous villain? First step in this downfall is when Gojo and Ghetto were escorting Riko, the Star Platinum vessel, to Tengen. Gojo and Ghetto had agreed that they would allow the Star Platinum vessel to leave if they did not want to assimilate, even if it meant having to fight Tengen. It is obvious with the small time they had spent together that Ghetto had grown to care for Riko and wanted her to—
The guy with the white hair is the guy with the main man.
know that they would protect her regardless of the choice that she makes. This heartfelt moment from Ghetto shows his humanity. He truly cared about Riko, and after she decided she wanted to live more,
Gojo.
Ghetto reaches out his hand for her. Before Riko can reach it, she's shot straight through the side of the head, and I believe this moment truly altered the trajectory of the entire story and Ghetto's life. Ghetto saw firsthand the cruelty and the unforgiving nature that is the world that we live in. Also, the fact that Toji basically caused all of this, being a non-sorcerer, probably didn't help the fact that Ghetto lost all of his affinity towards non-sorcerers and people without cursed energy. Another huge scene for this is when Gojo and Ghetto are carrying Riko's body through the Star Religious Group's building. As they all clap, celebrating the death of a young girl, Gojo questions if they should just kill all of the followers in the room. He says there really isn't a point to killing all of them since their leaders have left, although Gojo
don't follow him.
This is the question, does there really need to be a point to it? Honestly, my boy Gojo, you probably shouldn't have said that, but when the final episode of Hidden Inventory, Ghetto is doing missions alone since Gojo is strong enough to also carry out missions alone. It was a busy summer.
That was not my age.
He mentions, meaning there was probably many curses for him to absorb. Ghetto asks Haibara, are you okay with being a Jujutsu sorcerer? Doesn't it bother you? Haibara, being so wholesome, answers, giving it my all towards something I know I can help with is a great feeling. You know what, this is JJK, we can't have anything nice, and of course Haibara died. And he died at a point where Ghetto was already having thoughts about non-sorcerers, and of course Haibara, being a sorcerer, dying to protect those who cannot handle Jujutsu or even see curses themselves, might have some second thoughts about protecting those people. And especially after he saw those people clapping after Riko's death, and just all of the events leading up to this point, you have to wonder, you know, he might not want to protect these people anymore, and it's kind of understandable, even though, as we'll get to, he gets to some horrible point. Easily the most damaging conversation Ghetto has is with the special grade sorcerer, Yuki, and it's not really her fault that this happens, but I kind of want to dig into this conversation. So Ghetto says, if being a Jujutsu sorcerer is like running a marathon, then the finish line is too unclear. I don't really know how to feel. The preciousness of the weak, the ugliness of the weak, I can no longer tell the difference. The part of me that looks down on non-sorcerers, the part of me that tries to resist that feeling. I used to think that jujitsu sorcerers existed to protect non-sorcerers, but recently I've been doubting whether non-sorcerers are worth fighting for. Yuki then asks Geto, do you hate non-sorcerers? This is where Yuki suggests an idea in a world where curses don't even exist. She offers up two options to Geto: eradicate cursed energy from all of humanity, or teach humans how to control their cursed energy. Then the spark hits Geto. Why not just kill every non-jujitsu sorcerer? Yuki says that is an option, and a spark flicks in his mind. Weed out non-jujitsu sorcerers and make them adapt to a jujitsu sorcerer-based society. I think this moment in this conversation with Yuki is exactly where Geto chooses his path. And unfortunately, I think it was chosen for him, and we have to keep these girls from causing any more harm in the village. He notices these girls can see things much like him. They can see curses, and they're being ridiculed for their ability. After seeing them be put in a cage and be treated like animals, Geto unleashes his rage and begins his attack on humanity. See, Geto wasn't evil from the start. He had many factors go into his downfall, but all the dominoes fell in the right positions to create someone who was resentful towards regular people. And unfortunately, in the end, how it all works out, Geto plays right into the villain's hands, and unfortunately causes the downfall for not only himself, but also his best friend Gojo, who he was the strongest in tandem with. And it's just such a tragedy to see how these two turned out. So guys, this is just a quick video on Geto, and I want to thank you guys so much for watching. I have more stuff planned to yap about Geto, because he's just such an interesting character to me. But I want to thank you guys for checking this video out, and I'll see you in the next one.
Go to motionray.com to add this to your video, and that, and that!
Michaels is everything for holiday crafting. Heard the sequence too much.
Are you finally ready to talk about the dark thread that binds these men together?
How in the hell did you pull Simone Biles?
Yeah, man, it's really how she pulled me, man.
Let's look at this translucent named Yerky.
We saw that man drag Kiki Palmer across the couch, pregnant.
DDG, as a BD, will always have a lifeline and a puppet string to Holly because he can do things like this to make you act. Offset literally said it. You're my BM. I won. We investigating why men may love Panani, but also hate who have them. On today's Foreign Friday. As ambassador of the Negro Association, I declare this a state of emergency. From the makers of lockdown, I bring you Done. I beaten the hell up out of this Vine Boom sound today. If you said you know who it is, in the last fortnight, Chastity Gage. Don't pass go, don't collect $200, immediate Chastity Gage. You gotta lock that up. I got some questions that need answers. The actor boyfriend, because I don't know that name, and also Simone Biles' husband, because I also don't know that nickname. This phenomena occurs across race and female black women. We are in a waste man pandemic. I guess the best way to tell you is to show you. This is Yerky, looking like Ian from Shameless. Looking like Ian from Shameless, but when that actor played the Joker on Gotham. Who and why is Yerky, you may ask? You know, stay tuned. But as you can, when just a month ago, we were talking about Yerky's claim to fame, bigging up a Disney star. On their tombstone, impregnated Disney star. Guy Jackson is a Disney star, alleged domestic abuser.
In my previous video about great people who did some not so great things, we concluded that no one can be perfectly good, and even the greatest among us have done some pretty awful stuff. This naturally made me curious about the opposite question: who are the bad people in history, and what good, if any, did they do? Is it even possible to find something positive about those who are widely considered to be the worst people humanity has to offer? Or is there such thing as a perfectly evil person? And I don't just mean a nice side effect of something they did, like how some people jokingly say that Genghis Khan reduced global warming because of how many people he killed. No, I'm looking for actions they did that were actually good in and of itself. But even if we do find something good in these notoriously evil people, this doesn't at all excuse the fact that they're still terrible human beings, and nothing nice out about them will ever diminish the awfulness of their actions. Just as how you can criticize great figures in history without dismissing their achievements, you can also learn something positive about terrible people without excusing their evil deeds. So with that said, join me as we attempt to find something good about every evil person. We'll start off strong with the man of steel, Joseph Stalin, who ruled the Soviet Union for nearly 30 years up until his death in 1953. Stalin's regime was responsible for deporting millions of its own citizens to labor camps, executing hundreds of thousands of his perceived enemies, ordering unwarranted detention and torture of suspected civilians, and exacerbating famines that killed millions of his own people. It is therefore no surprise that Stalin is widely considered to be one of history's most brutal tyrants, with few leaders in the 20th century outmatching the scale of his atrocities. But despite all his faults, Stalin managed to transform a poor, rural, backwards nation into an industrialized superpower second only to that of the United States. Literacy rates increased from 25% before the Soviet Union to 94% halfway through Stalin's reign, and life expectancy by the time he died was more than double what it was pre-revolution. But perhaps Stalin's greatest accomplishment that many Russians today still admire him for was his victory over the Nazis in the Great Patriotic War, more commonly known to us in the West as World War II. Putting aside the slightly inconvenient bit about him purging his own army right before the war, and his less than optimal military decisions that led to millions of Soviets needlessly dying, Stalin's regime still deserves praise for bearing most of the burden in the Second World War. Under his leadership, 27 million Soviets sacrificed their lives fighting bravely against the Nazis, and is basically the reason why this video is in England, then Nazi Germany, and then the Soviet Union. That America would enter the 21st century without any more enemies, and create a world full of wonderful liberal democracies, guided by the only superpower left standing. But this American dream would come crashing down to reality just 1 year, 9 months, and 11 deadliest terrorist events in US history. After 9/11, Osama started playing hide-and-seek with the American government, and it took 10 years before he was finally tracked down and killed in his bunker in Pakistan. Thanks, Obama. And here is where we can maybe find something good about Osama, since his personal hard drive was seized after the raid and declassified. After going through his files, we were able to discover that he had written letters calling for Americans to save humanity by helping to fight climate change. For the 10th anniversary of 9/11, he apparently asked his team to launch a media campaign that included an urgent plea for the world to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions. It's nice to learn that between every terrorist attack he planned, he always played Counter-Strike, Mario, and Animal Crossing. He also watched Naruto and Dragon Balls, as well as having this video saved, which he called Foonie Cats 4, with the Shrek theme song as its background.
Somebody once told me so much to do, so much. Hey now, you're an all-star.
Bin Laden forever changed for ounces. So the next time the TSA is searching your balls for a hidden bomb, remember to say, thanks Osama. But he's also the reason why the American government went into full panic mode after 9/11 and invaded a country that had nothing to do with the attacks because of the new axis of evil, consisting of Iran, Iraq, and North Korea. Which leads us to our next villain, Kim Jong.
A few years ago, I was working in marketing for a client in the retail sector.
Jong-il, not to be confused with his spoiled son and current leader Kim Jong-un, or his father who created North Korea, Kim Il-sung. While obviously subjective, it's reasonable to argue that out of the 3 leaders in North Korea's history, Kim Jong-il was probably the worst. He somehow had both Stalin's disdain for human suffering, as well as Osama's cold-blooded ruthlessness toward innocent civilians. Like Stalin, he completely neglected millions of his own citizens who were starving to death, stubbornly insisting that North Korea's glorious Juche, or self-reliance ideology, would be able to feed everyone without help from other nations. It wasn't until the country turned into hell on earth and people resorting to eating grass, bark, and rats to survive when the government finally admitted to the world that they did indeed have food shortages and begged for the much-needed aid. And like Osama, he was also responsible for the horrific Flight 858 terrorist attack, where a bomb was planted in a South Korean commercial airplane that killed all 100 passengers on board. Additionally, thousands of South Koreans, as well as dozens of Japanese citizens, have been kidnapped over the decades under Kim Jong-il's orders. Despite all these crimes against humanity, here are some good things Kim Jong-il did throughout his life. For one, whether it was out of sheer necessity or a genuine interest to improve the conditions of his people, he began to allow some economic reforms, following China's model of opening up special economic zones in the country, where a little bit of good old capitalism can function there. He was also interested in finally making amends with South Korea, and cooperated with their so-called Sunshine Policy, where both states would strengthen communication with each other and work together on several business ventures to help the North's stagnant economy. Still, Kim Jong-il's brutality towards his own people and his willingness to commit terrorism abroad makes him the worst leader in in North Korea's history. But surprisingly, he's not the first pseudo-socialist leader with a cult of personality almost as unhinged as Taylor Swift's. Believe it or not, that would be an American pastor by the name of Jim Jones, architect of the infamous Jonestown Massacre. What started off as just one of many hippie groups that were popular in the 60s took things for the worse when Jones decided to relocate his nearly 1,000 followers to any communist nation that would take them in. China and the Soviet Union rejected his request, but Guyana, which had recently formed a left-wing government, was sympathetic to his cause and allowed his cult to move in. Upon arrival, he declared this new commune to be called Jonestown, a paradise on earth. Which, by the way, if anyone ever declares a place to be a paradise, please just run away. But one positive aspect about Mr. Jones was his genuine and unapologetic support for racial minorities, perhaps a result of either his socialist ideology or religious beliefs. Regardless of the reason, Jones was at the forefront of Indiana's civil rights movement, helping to racially integrate churches, restaurants, the police, and hospitals throughout the state. When swastikas were painted on the homes of 2 black families, the pastor comforted them and implored for other households to not move away. He helped set up sting operations to catch businesses who refused to serve black customers, and directly confronted neo-Nazis trying to stop him. It was for this reason why the man was able to attract such a large following in the first place, with much of his cult consisting of racial minorities who admired Jones for his truly brave actions against injustice. But fast forward back to the South American commune, where his cult was toiling away and starving for the past year. By this point, Father, as Jones was called, had implemented North Korea's system of 8 hours work followed by 8 hours of study, which was basically just him ranting to everyone about the evils of America and reading political commentary from communist nations. Hunger and disease were widespread, since the land where the commune was established wasn't fertile enough to grow a sufficient amount of food, and a lack of trained medical staff meant that no one was able to properly treat the sick.
Which has more destructive power, lasers or lightning? Today, to declare a final champion among all the elements we tested head-to-head on my channel, they'll be facing off in tests against 7 household objects, including a CD, a crystal ball, and a safe full of cash. Let's go! And since Laser had to defeat Lava to make it to the finals, your favorite Mark, you're so positive. Representing Lightning is Mehdi Sadeghdar. Again, for the final encore performance, I'm not going to be watching from the sidelines either, as all 7 objects will have to face my epic stage in the competition. The new trash talk commenced immediately.
Lightning beats everything. I'm just worried about you surviving.
Well, let's get started.
You're doomed, Bob. Lightning.
And with that, it was time to start our 7-item showdown of destruction, starting with a contest to burn a CD from our personal collections. Literally. And Bob is going to get us started by using his super powerful military-grade laser to destroy Rod Stewart's greatest hits.
Bold choice. I'm a big Rod Stewart fan, especially track 9.
So Bob fired up both his laser and his Rod Stewart deep cut.
Wow.
What? No, wait, it's gone!
Where's the
it's
CD?
Gone!
It's like the end of Avengers.
What happened? We had to use a replay to realize that Bob's super powerful laser had folded the CD like a taco before incinerating it in an undeniable show.
What is that? That's nothing, Bob.
Oh.
That's literally ash.
You might still be able to play that. Yeah. Watch me do it. Mehdi, out of the gate strong with the trash talk.
Yeah, let's hope he can live up to that. Okay, wow. He's a mess.
Now it was Lightning, so it's time to see how Mehdi planned to use the super mean-looking Tesla coil that he brought the Crunch Labs.
So to burn my CD, I'm gonna use this just...
Did you just get shot?
Hey, it went to the ground through my shoe.
You're like talking slower, I feel
I
like.
broke my CD. Poor Chris the Bird. Lady in red.
Time to see if the Tesla coil could shock the CD as well as it shocked Mehdi. And it worked beautifully. Arcing patterns lighting up Crunch Labs. They were so gorgeous. And like moths to a light, we just had to get closer. Until we remembered we were working by Mehdi's safety standards. Wow. Like a little bit longer and I think it would have cut all the way through.
I think we should try it one more time.
I have second thoughts.
I never have second thoughts. I try it again, and every time I learn something new. With a scar. I don't have a good feeling about that.
Mehdi had used a wire to ground the CD so he could get close without having to worry. Mehdi had become the god of thunder.
That's how you erase a CD!
And this crystal ball CD was facing its Ragnarok.
It's beautiful!
Until Mehdi shocked himself.
Okay.
But despite the second self-own of the day, Mehdi had done a pretty great job at burning the CD.
Because I know what I'm doing, kind of.
And this is a good time to point out, even though Mehdi has made a career out of building really cool things that always somehow shock him, he does have a master's degree in electrical engineering and is very smart and actually does know exactly what he's doing. In other words, please don't try this with your own 4-foot Tesla coil at home. Throw the X Factor. It was time to show these boys what the X Factor can pull off. Gentlemen, prepare to have your minds blown.
Really? Microwave?
It's not just any microwave, it's a microwave with 2 googly eyes. But googly eyes or not, Mariah Carey was in for a little excitement. 3, 2, 1.
No, wait, I was always told you never put metal into a microwave.
This is true. Do not try this at home. Only try this at Crunch Labs. Whoa! No! The microwave put on quite a techno light show for us. Whoa! And it did a great job. Don't breathe that smoke. But ultimately, besides destroying a CD beyond repair, the final verdict was, I think Maddie's was the coolest.
Yeah.
Of course it was.
Bop.
On to round 2.
So now that we had the first point on the board, we got ready for a chilly round 2. Solid block of ice.
I'm gonna make a swan sculpture out of it.
I don't want to spoil anything, but I'm feeling good about my chances on this one.
You do a chainsaw.
And Bob was up first with the super powerful laser.
All right, guys, let's go.
And as he worked his laser across the surface of the ice, the dripping water indicated that his laser was
So weak. Is it even doing anything, Bob?
Hey, this is how light works.
And honestly, he's right. Since ice is more or less transparent, the laser passes straight through and doesn't bounce off or get absorbed by anything, which means it doesn't build up enough heat to cause any damage.
Wow! You're giant.
So this time, Bob focused his laser on one spot and held it there. And it started to create a rough surface on the ice, which allowed the laser to finally interact with something and build up some heat, eventually boring a hole all the way through.
Oh, that is cool, actually.
Yeah.
It looks very bullet-like.
It's a bullet that kills you in half an hour.
It was time for Mehdi to back up all that trash talk.
Let me show you how it's done. I'm gonna use a welding machine and run 650 amps of current through this.
Go!
Like I was saying.
Basically, Mehdi's plan was to use the buildup of heat from electrical resistance to create a hot rebar knife through icy butter. Oh, we got a sizzle.
Yeah. Give me more juice.
Wow, that's red.
Now watch this.
Whoa, that's cool.
how we do
You're
it.
bending the rod. And it worked really well until it did.
What happened?
Wow, it's black in the middle now.
I think your ice is too cold.
So Mehdi added a little bit of elbow grease to try and saw his way through the ice by using the parts of the rebar that were still glowing hot.
A little from that
And
side.
despite his best efforts resulting in a little melting, but much more reheating and then subsequent bending.
Stop it. No arcing. No. All right, I'm done.
Ooh, so close. It was a failure, but it was a cool failure. Enough of these jokers. It was time for the X Factor. This, boys, is how you win a competition.
Actually, kind of excited to see this.
With the red hot nickel ball. Whoa.
It's a very satisfying sound.
The question is, can I make it deeper than Mehdi did? Go, go, go! The core of this nickel ball had been heated to 2,000 degrees, and it was slowly but surely making its way down the ice. Go in the distance.
Is it?
But unfortunately for me, the laws of thermodynamics had other plans. Oh no! It's full of water. It stole all of its energy. It takes a lot of energy to heat up water.
I guess there's a clear winner.
Is there a clear winner? Really, there were no clear winners in this group. I have a solution. This is how we're gonna solve this. So we decided to add a little gravity. Push! And whoever's block broke the cleanest must have done the most damage. So they'd be declared the winner. And devastatingly, for the second round in a row,
Wow.
dang it!
Oh, Canada.
You're getting all nationalistic on us. All right,
Okay.
2-0. Next challenge. So we moved on to lamps, and this one was gonna be a little bit different. This is a Science Bob lamp.
This is a science pop lamp.
Because this time we wouldn't be trying to destroy lamps. We'd be using our chosen elements to create lamps. Ooh.
For my lamp, I have got some ultraviolet reactive slime. I'm gonna hit it with a sparkle pattern ultraviolet laser filter. It should look pretty cool. Kill the lights!
I can't see, Bob!
Activate the laser.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related. Bada bing, bada boom.
Loose. Rapid fire gun boom maker shot about from keep up other today's story. We had a ton of members on our team working on this. We had 6 people working on this case alone. It is a behemoth of a case, genuinely. We had 3 translators who spoke Portuguese help assist with gathering of the data on this one, but it is still an incredibly complicated, controversial case. There's probably at least like 100 people involved, either directly or indirectly. Probably in the hundreds, if I'm being honest. There's constant contradicting statements, contradicting sources. Everyone seems to have their own perspective and reasoning for what they say truly happened. Our researchers try to refer to the more trustworthy sources as much as possible, so court documents, official documentaries, testimonies, to make the whole process as accurate as possible. But when you have that many people involved with their own story of what really happened or what they believed happened, it's just gonna get really, really messy very quickly. So as always, please let us know in the comments if something was lost in translation, miscommunicated, or if you have any additional things that you know about this case. And a quick disclaimer, 2 disclaimers. Okay, so this case takes place in Brazil, and one of our researchers actually lives in Brazil, so we tried to get as much of like the cultural context as possible. But just a reminder, whenever we talk about other countries, let's not throw stones from our glass houses. It seems like every country has essentially the same problems, just in varying degrees. But just to be extra clear, anything we talk about today is not a reflection on the Brazilian people as a whole. This is a case where there's a lot of religious talk. This is also not representative of Christianity as a whole. And since we're at it, there is a murder victim in today's case that was later accused of doing some really, really heinous things like assault. If these allegations are true, he should have been held to the highest punishment of the law and sentenced in the court system. But instead, he was murdered. And I know it sounds a bit simpler when I state it like that, but like, trust me, this case is anything but simple. There has been so much doubt created by the public on some of the essay claims, but it's not because the public doesn't want to believe the victims, but it's just really complicated. It seemed like at that point when these claims were coming out, everybody had their own motive to talk about certain things, so just keep it in mind. And with that being said, let's get into it. It's stated that if you wanted to control someone in Congresswoman Flore's home, this is what you would do. You would grab a pot, fill it with some honey, melon, and crystal sugar. Perhaps bring it to a simmer, cooking up all the intention and energy. And then you place in 2 slips of paper, one with your name, the controller, and then the name of the person that you want to control. You just want to do everything. You want to think a thought, and they'll do it, like a robot, like a brainless zombie. And then you add in a piece of sentimental jewelry inside the pot. You light a candle, and for 7 days, you pray about the intention. You pray about how you will be able to dictate everything that they think, control every thought, every emotion, every action that this person has. That is how you get to control someone. But a lot of people, at least many of Flore's adopted children, would argue that this is bordering on dark magic. And they were, but they've been lost in history. They weren't written down in the Bible. Flore took these rituals very, very seriously. It said that she would lock her adopted children into dark rooms for 21 days straight, isolate them. The door would only open twice a day to slip in some food. And her kids, her adopted kids, they felt like they were going crazy. But she told them, keep praying. This was to purify them. Other times, it said that she would have them all stand in a circle, all of her adopted kids. She would hand out knives, make them cut their palms, draw blood, and write Bible verses in their own blood. Other allegations included Congresswoman Flore having sexual relations with others under the pretense of cleansing them with her seemingly dark magic powers. One man said he was certain that Flore had black magic in her body. When she was engaging in these intimate relations, he said it felt like he was in a trance, like he wasn't involved with a human. He was doing something intimate with a divine being. It was like an out-of-worldly experience. It said that Flore also believed
he's full of shit if he was doing that shit to a little kid.
In a deeper ritualistic meaning of certain objects. She would have wealthy businessmen come over, and if they confided in her that they wanted to be even more successful in the upcoming year, she would have them get naked, sit on an apple with honey drizzled on top of it. There would be multicolored strings attached to the apple, and this was all for enlightenment, all for good luck.
I'm sorry, they're sitting on a apple.
Covered with honey.
And that's it. That's what they're doing.
And taking pictures of it.
And they were naked.
Yeah. So, which side note, I don't want to make it seem like something is wrong with these practices. I'm not exactly sure how to categorize them. I mean, in this context, people call them dark magic. I'm not sure if that's the right categorization.
I sound like blackmail.
I don't think anything's inherently wrong. I think that everyone should feel free to practice whatever they want, as long as nobody gets hurt, everybody's an adult, and no law is broken. But I think the negative connotation in today's case is that she's a pastor. She's supposed to be leading a group of people closer to a very specific faith that they believe in, yet in her free time, she's doing things that most Christians would probably faint at the idea of doing. So I guess it's more of the misalignment than anything. Another time, one of the adopted kids stated that she walked into a room and Congresswoman Flore's husband was standing in the middle of a chalk circle, like a circle on the floor.
Yeah.
Yes, and he's naked. And Congresswoman Flore starts talking, but it sounds more like a chant. She didn't really understand what was going on or what was being said, but it was very, very clear what Flore was trying to do here. Congresswoman Flore was trying to offer up her husband as a sacrifice.
And when you say husband, is that the adopted child?
Yeah, that she married. So when Congresswoman Flore's husband is found dead, the question came up for a lot of people. Was it really murder? Was he sacrificed? Was it black magic? Flore said when she grew up, she always wanted to be that drone footage flying over parts of Brazil that you would see these beautifully, well, if you don't really know the context, it's beautiful, colorful homes built almost stacked on top of each other up the hills of Brazil. They're called favelas. And there's this picture of one of the favelas at night where there's just lights lining up the hill. And there's almost this serene beauty in the picture. It looks like LA, the Hollywood Hills lit up at night. It's the type of place that you would drive by and be like, oh, what kind of people live on a house at the top of the hill? But in Brazil, it's actually the opposite. On the hill is not where you want to be. There is no government, no zoning, no building codes, no law. The houses are built typically from scrap or stolen materials, and depending on the favela, some of them don't have basic infrastructures in place like sewage networks or even clean water. Some have stated that favelas are some of the most dangerous places in all of Brazil. In Rio de Janeiro alone, it's estimated that almost 2 million people live in these favelas around the city, and around 6% of the total population of Brazil live in favelas. And it's likely not a choice. Favelas are often associated with like extreme poverty. These are the people who were pushed out of the cities because they can't afford it. So they're forced to, because they're like, you live in a favela, you're probably associated with the gang. I would call favelas a city of extremes. Because there's no government oversight, you can see most extreme versions of bad and good just colliding in one place. So the bad being, favelas are run by gangs and arms gangs. They have all the power and influence. They are known to be ruthless, brutal. They will take civilians, stuff them into tires, and light tires on communities. Civilians are inspired to take the hardships that they face, and there's actually a very strong artistic side in favelas. Like, you will see some of the most creative people in favelas. It's interesting. And parents of children, they don't have the means to even purchase soccer balls for their kids, but you still see kids running around the hill with a ball, and it's always made out of random scraps. Recycled bottles, trash, and they just rolled it up. It was fine as long as it rolls. And then right around them, you see kids not much older than them who were probably kicking around a ball of cans not too long ago. And now that like most people on the second would sit down for dinner, and the floor is no proof that it happened other than the crocodile. One of the most, one night, it's pouring down rain. Most people, they retreated into their homes, and there's lightning. It's like flashing brightly. Everybody's kind of freaked out. There's this eerie aura. Carmozina and her kids, they're living in a house that has a Swiss cheese roof, basically. Just a ton of holes everywhere. So the minute that it rains, just drip, drip, water pouring in. They're running around setting up buckets and bowls, catching the rainwater, throwing it out the window, then putting it back so that it could refill. But that night, there's this pounding at their door. A neighbor. He's drenched in rain head to toe, begging Carmozina, you have to cure me of my terminal lung cancer. I'm gonna die. Carmozina agreed, let the man in, and started the ritual that night. She placed a chair in the middle of the room and told him, sit. Some people who knew her said that a lot of these rituals resembled exorcisms more than anything. She would start speaking in unknown languages and in a very low tone. Sometimes it sounded like she was almost growling or hissing. Carmozina's other 4 kids, they were terrified. Anytime their mom had a little ritual of sorts, they would go hide in their rooms. But Flor was fascinated. If anyone was peeking around the corner to learn and watch, it was Flor. She wanted to learn Carmozina that were making stars. She yelled at him. Flor watched, flipped, bright mouth. And in the following, I told you, that witch knows what she's doing. Until the man died. So when another wife and kids walk in, they were a small family from the town over, and they came to pay their respects to their father and husband. So this man was living a double life. He had 2 wives and 2 families in 2 different towns. And Carmozina held her chest up and said, clearly my ritual didn't work because his life was full of sin. That is something even I cannot cure. And everyone agreed. But there was kind of a question of like, you know, who decides who has supernatural powers, right? Is that something that you're born with? Is that something that you learn? When did she even become a witch? Carmozina might say that it started when she was 17, and she bathed herself in her dead brother's blood. So in order to fully understand Flor's life and her dark magic allegations, we kind of have to understand her mom. Carmozina's life is very complicated, and it's said that everything that she learned in terms of dark magic, she passed on to Flor. And it was like the connection between mother and daughter, and also generational trauma. So Carmozina was forced to marry a man that she absolutely despised. He was the definition of evil. He would violently essay her, physically abuse her. He tried to kill her in the sense of just everything, emotionally, physically, just wanted her to die, basically. When Carmozina was beaten within like an inch of her life, she ran away from her husband straight to her parents, and instead of protecting her, her parents dragged her back to her husband's doorstep, and her mom got down and scolded her and said, a man only beats his wife because he loves her. All of this is gonna get beaten less and less. Flor's uncle. And Godal Flor's, that's how she went in her room, and she's up. So what Haida is talking about. And at her and accidents, baby, her brother shops and strained it in like remembered and daughter. They sent her first, and it's a to stick spine, have it, but believe now. Let how it's going on. I'm stand up, shut it, run up. Just looked at her and with her second, I have nonsense. Means and then it's time. It isn't a floor is that authority put car crash.
Pursue your passion for working with animals through Penn Foster's online veterinary programs.
So then purely
car accident. I mean, it's crazy that I'm sure after the first car incident, they were having shaken feelings of like, oh my gosh, what a close call. Maybe Carmozina was right. It's very interesting. On the day of Flor's dad's funeral, the pastor asked Flor if she could sing for the crowd gathered there. It was all very last minute, and Flor's like 14. She doesn't have a band or a mic. She really does have a beautiful voice, though. She sang a cappella, no mic, in the church, just her vocal strength, and everyone in attendance was moved. For her, her father's funeral was the first time that she felt some level of fame. And it seemed like she really, really liked it. It was her dad's funeral, where she would bump into a man named Paolo, her soon-to-be first husband. So the way that they met honestly sounds